I watched Sergeant Major John Dro's his briefing, and it reminded me of September 13th, 2001, when I arrived at the National Training Center to begin a rotation. And it was a major combat operation. It was tank on tank. It was in the middle of the desert, and it was with equipment that very few of the vehicles had GPSs. Very few had more than FM radios. And it was the same equipment that we deployed my brigade in 2003 to Iraq, where we ended up cutting metal doors and placing them on the vehicles. To today, what you saw in Sergeant Major John Dro's briefing, where our equipment is state-of-the-art with multiple radio systems from TAC sets to battle BFTs in every vehicle. And how do you train that? How do you get it set up? And how do you get a unit, a brigade combat team or a enhanced brigade prepared to go to war? Well, that's what we do at the National Training Center. So I'm going to spend about 5 minutes or so, and I'm going to show you what we do, how we take that, how we take technology that's coming into the Army, and how we train and prepare our warriors, Army, Air Force, Navy, Marines, and now after our last rotation, Coast Guard, to be able to deploy and win. Run the video, please.
The National Training Center at Fort Irwin, California serves our nation as the premier military training center of the world. The NTC trains and prepares our armed forces, the Army, Air Force, Marines, Special Ops, Navy SEALs for the rigors of combat. Every NTC rotation includes U.S. interagency and multinational organizations and contractors for additional realism. Moreover, every rotation at the NTC replicates both the contemporary operating environment and the arduous conditions of Iraq or Afghanistan. Experience the training occurring at the National Training Center 10 times a year.
402, 403.
What they're presented with is a very complex task here.
It's really real. Amputees and blood splurting everywhere, and it kind of almost go into shock when they see that stuff. So.
Where's he coming from?
What you just watched is the combat mounted patrol that is conducted in one of our 12 towns at the National Training Center. Next slide. Although we don't have the corner on training alone, we are one of 5 of the Department of Defense's combat training centers, to include Nellis Air Force Base, which is tied to the National Training Center, and 29 Palms out of the Marine Corps Training Base, which is also tied to us. We have JRTC at Fort Polk, Louisiana, and JMRC out of Germany. Together, we stay connected to make sure that our training stays synchronized between all of our centers. Next slide. Our location is critical. We're about 1,100 square miles, and we are in an isolated position in the middle of the Mojave Desert, 55 miles northwest of 29 Palms. The environment allows us to use a lot of things that other installations cannot try, test, or train. to include a GSM network where 400 cell phones are used throughout our box, which allow us to send radio traffic or cell phone traffic throughout our battle space, just as the insurgents would do. And brigade combat teams intercept the information, dissect the information, and then help fight the bomb left of the explosion. We also have all restricted airspace due to us, Edwards Air Force Base in 29 Palms, for about 1,500 square miles. So we rack and stack, brigade combat teams rack and stack the aviation assets to include UAVs, fixed wing, and rotary wing aircraft. Next slide. Today everybody's talked about renewable energy, but how does it affect us? Well, our FOBs that we have out in our forward operating bases, and there's 7 of them, now have renewable energy. And we're about 25% usage of it at this point. But we're trying to get to our COPs, which replicate our Afghanistan outposts that are up in the mountains, to renewable energy also. And we've worked with AMC to get to that because it'll limit the amount of footprint or the amount of logistics train that is required to maintain a FOB or a COP anywhere in the world where it's deployed. Next slide. This is just a picture of one of our Iraqi villages. This is actually from DARPA, but it is a village that is connected to Medina Wasl. Our villages range from 25 to 30 buildings to Medina Jabal, which has now 650 buildings, multiple layered, and a detention facility. It is there to immerse a soldier, sailor, airman, or Marine into the environment that they will fight in, whether it is Iraq or Afghanistan or anywhere else in the world. Next slide. And we've talked about most of these initiatives. HME Labs is something that is new to the National Training Center and is where we build underground all of our explosives in HME Labs. And we have 6 of them that are out throughout our battle space. Everything we do at the National Training Center is real. Everything is made in the box. Nothing is administratively moved. To set an IED, the insurgent force builds it with an HME lab that is usually under a goat pen or under a building in a false trap door. At night, after the explosives are made, they'll put them into a vehicle. We run about 450 civilian on the battlefield vehicles in the box continuously. They'll load it in a false bottom or a false side or under a seat or in a seat, and then they will move it to a point where somebody has been on the ground. They've been watching, they've been planning, they've been watching how a unit moves, how much eyes they have on an area, and the lethality of the target. And then they place the bomb in the ground, and then they detonate it on the force. Simultaneously, all that is happening over our cell phone network, which we monitor, or the unit monitors. So if they pick up on the trends, they can stop the explosion before it happens. Next slide. These are just some slides of some of the things that we do at the National Training Center. You've seen all these slides before because people have showed you, but it just shows you the vast array of tools that we have. Next slide. And I've talked about our world-class OP4. We have about 2,500 soldiers and civilians that go out with every one of our rotations. 1,250 are role players from the 11th Armored Cavalry Regiment. 150 are insurgents from the 11th Armored Cavalry Regiment that are trained, that study every single day the opponent's force. And we stay current by sending a team to Baghdad or into Iraq and Afghanistan every single quarter. And they ride with U.S. and coalition units. What's interesting about the National Training Center, since 2004, the National Training Center and the Joint Readiness Training Center have focused on irregular warfare and COIN operations, counterinsurgency. And that has been our bread and butter over the last 3 or 4 years, because that's the fight that we're in. That is our mission readiness exercises. This year, under the guidance of the Chief of Staff of the Army, the National Training Center will run a major combat operation at the NTC. We're going to go back and find out what we've lost over the last few years, and we're going to start prepping to be able to train units to go back to that. Now, will it affect units that are going into theater? No, it will not. Every unit that deploys will get a mission readiness exercise that is based on the current threat, the current threats in theater, and it'll happen right before they deploy. But units that have longer dwells will get an opportunity to do a rotation at one of our training centers and do major combat operations to work on some of the skill sets that have deteriorated over the last few years. Next slide. Counter IED. JIDO has got and JCOE is based at the National Training Center. So a lot of the systems that you see are in use at the NTC, and if not there, their surrogates are, whether it's the Buffalo, the MRAP, all their surrogates are in place, and we teach, again, how to fight left of the bomb, how to get into their planning cycle, how to read their threads, and how to get to the insurgent before he can kill you. Next slide. NTC is preparing for the future. We're equipping and modernizing. We're getting set to not only fight major combat operations, but continue with the irregular warfare and continue with coin operations. Even in our major combat operations scenarios, you will see threads of irregular warfare, and you'll see us. We've learned a lot from our counterinsurgency fight. Next slide. I just want to thank you personally as a Command Sergeant Major National Training Center, but more importantly as a father and as a spouse of a wife that is deployed into Iraq and a son that has been into Iraq and a son that is going to Afghanistan. What you've done as a collective group to improve the technology that we have on our battlefield today is absolutely impressive. We had an M16 rifle for 25 years, and in 5 years we've changed the way soldiers look, the way soldiers fight, and the way soldiers are protected. So I personally want to thank each and every one of you that have anything to do with that, because many of our warriors are coming home alive today because of you.